Hi. It's a nice spring day. I'd say we're in spring now. It's looking like nice weather, and there's a number of things I want to bring into this video, so bear with me. Um, guess the open question here is: do we live in a cynical time? Do we live in an era when people question everything, where they feel that there's always an ulterior motive to human behavior? That there is a general negativity about the way human society is going. Is that the era that we are in, or is that an exaggeration? So that's what I'm going to be exploring in this video a little bit, as I see it. Um, I've always believed that you cannot just dismiss any time as all good or all bad, any time. But there are times, I always quote history because I'm interested in history. There's times throughout history that have been particularly bad. I made a video a while back about the notion that 2020 was the worst year, and I argued it was a bad year, but I wouldn't say it was the worst. I think 1918 would be a very good claimant for that. Why? It was the deadliest year of the First World War. It was the year of the 1918 or Spanish flu pandemic. Um, there was real unrest across Eastern Europe and the Balkans. There was a lot of things going on there. It was a very, very difficult time. The First World War may have ended, but the legacy was millions of men dead, extensive damage, crippled minds. 1918, I think, was a very challenging year. Um, but even then, you could find glimmers of hope. For example, the first votes for women was brought in, and where certain advances being made in other areas. Um, I think at any point in history, you'll find advances. I mean, we talk about the sophistication of Rome, but that was leveled with, extreme cruelty, crucifixion, the gladiatorial games, slavery. Um, So, amidst all that philosophy and great civilization and intelligence and sophistication, there was also, a lot of cruelty. So, human society has always had contradictions. The 20th century was both the best century and the worst century, arguably. And we're now a fifth of the way into the 21st century. So, how's this going to turn out? Will there be another world war? I think that the thing about the World War Three concept is, if we even look at it as World War Three, depending on the definition. I mean, Churchill actually considered the Seven Years' War to be the first world war in the sense it was a global conflict. Um, but of course, he didn't really popularize those terms. Um, but insofar as we look at World War Three, there's been many, many points. The Cuban Missile Crisis, tensions between the West and Iran, tensions between the West and China, various geopolitical incidents like the time a Russian jet was shot down over Turkey. There's lots of flashpoints where the tabloids rush to say is World War Three coming. I think if we're looking at the geopolitical situation right now, there's no escaping the fact it is tense. There's no way to gloss that over because China-West relations are very bad right now, very tense, for a range of reasons. Um, and yet, in a way, it's even more complicated than the Cold War because the Soviet Union was never a major economic force in the same way that China is. So that adds another complicated layer to this. Um, if we look at Western societies, I would say the United States, for example, the culture wars are really, really um, tense right now with the whole issue around race relations, police power, and Me Too. On top of that, you have all these fabrics of social contentions that generate very, very polarized positions. Where the right is very outspoken, where the left is very outspoken, and centrists and moderates kind of get lost in the quagmire of the middle somewhere. Um, and that's also true in Britain to an extent, although here it's with slightly different issues. Here it's issues to do with the future of the monarchy. It's issues to do with the union itself. Um, so this country is by no means in a position where we could say we are absolutely confident things will be okay in the post-Brexit era. There are a lot of question marks. I wish there wasn't. There are. Um, and of course, recent events in Northern Ireland don't help. So on both sides of the Atlantic, I think there is a lot of ground to be cynical. There's a lot of ground to think what is happening in society, where these divisions only seem to be getting worse. Um, Now, I've got my opinions like everyone else. I could say, well, it's this group causing it, it's that group causing it, but um, that's only my opinions. Other people might disagree. And I wouldn't even say any single group is responsible for everything that's going on. I do personally think that regarding the culture wars in the United States, I think it's two extremes. I think you have this woke left intolerance which is incredibly controlling, incredibly manipulative, and in my opinion also dishonest. But you also have the faction of hardcore Trump supporters who are very vocal and, as they've shown, prepared to use violence, as are far left activists. So it's concerning. It is concerning. Um, and then on top of this, we have these tensions with China and with Russia, and it just it's very easy to fall into a cynical situation of where is the good in this world? There is so many things going wrong. We've seen severe ecological damage in recent years with the wildfires in Australia and the Amazon. And I'm not going to make this video about a debate on climate change issues, but I don't think anyone could deny that the world is facing serious ecological challenges. I don't think anyone can rationally deny that. Um, so we're destroying ourselves. I may dislike Extinction Rebellion and the way they go about things, but I've never disagreed with the principle that as the world population gets bigger, more human activity must mean more responsibility, um, in terms of how we we relate to the environment that we're in, the world more broadly speaking. But I would say a few things about another thing that comes into this. And I have to mention this because it's so critical. Social media. Social media is, it's, I wouldn't entirely say it's a bad thing because without social media, social media can connect people. You can connect with friends that you haven't seen. It's a way to keep in touch. Whereas in the past, it was only phone calls and emails that weren't always reliable, letters perhaps. Social media, you can connect with people. It could be good in terms of communication for political unrest. People power movements can connect in a way that they couldn't in the past, or maybe they would have done in a different way. It can raise awareness of good causes. It can be a good thing. I've never said social media is all bad. However, the bad side is very obvious. With social media, we get the rise of the internet, the court of the internet, as I would call it. We've heard of a TV trial or a media trial. Well, the power of social media is such that someone could say something, which is maybe a little bit reckless or badly worded 7 years ago, 10 years ago, and it's dug up and it's used against them. And I really do think we need to give people a little bit of benefit of the doubt because we all say things at times that maybe we don't quite mean. I think some people are a bit more flippant and reckless than others. But, thinking, I watched the royal funeral yesterday. I watched the funeral of Prince Philip. And like I said in the previous video, one thing that I think people have found comforting almost about Philip is the fact he was blunt. A lot of the time, it was perceived as rude, but there's another way to look at it now, which was that he was actually trying to break down the stuffiness of royal protocol. And also, there's something refreshing about someone that just spoke his mind. because I think a lot of people kind of envied Philip in that sense. I do believe he was somewhat insulated by his royal role. I think had a politician said the things he said, they'd be in a lot, it would be a lot, the consequence would be more damaging. But maybe, maybe the legacy of Prince Philip is about being true to ourselves. You know, maybe there's something in that. I mean, we really do live in an era where social media is so powerful. People in companies are told, be careful what you say on social media because if you're representing a company or an organization, it will reflect badly on us. I take a slightly dissident view on this. I take a view that so long as someone is not speaking in the name of their company or their organization, like say for example, let's just say for the sake of argument, they were working for Tesco's and they were wearing their Tesco's uniform and they made a controversial comment about Black Lives Matter. I can understand why that would be controversial because they're wearing the uniform of an organization, which then makes it look like it's the company's position. But I strongly believe that we have to defend freedom of expression. So if someone has a controversial view, so long as they're not breaking the law, so long as they're not making threats, then they should be allowed to have that. If it's, an insulting viewpoint, or because insulting is abstract, isn't it? Who gets to decide what is insulting? If it's a provocative viewpoint, just challenge them. I really am very, very wary of this cancel culture, this drive to sort of castigate people. I read about a young man who was a dance choreographer. I don't recall his name off the top of my head. If you just bear with me, try and get a reference to that. Um, but basically, he took his life, and he'd been caught up in Me Too allegations. Um, Probably could make a video just about that, but I'll just mention here Liam Scarlett, yeah, 35, same age as me. He was found dead, probably suicide. Now, apparently, even after he was acquitted over the sexual harassment allegations, the company he was involved in, I think it was a Royal Ballet Company, kind of suspended him. And to me, this is a good example of the cynicism that we see. People being punished even when they've been acquitted. And when I say people, really, it's men. With me too, if a man in public life is accused of something, whether he is guilty or innocent, he is going to be punished. Because even if he's not punished in a court of law, he's punished by the industry that he's in. If he's a politician, his political career is over. If he's an actor, his acting career is over. If he's a sports person, he will be his team that he's in or endorsers will be forced to drop it. I think that is deeply concerning. If I was running a company and let's say a man in my company was accused of something, obviously I would take it seriously. Um, Probably something like a temporary suspension whilst investigation is ongoing, but I would continue to pay him. Why? Because he would still be an employee, and I don't see why he should be punished when we don't know. Or even, and this is controversial, nothing would change. I'd just continue employing him, and then if he's arrested, then he's arrested. If he has a trial date, then he has a trial date. I wouldn't support him. I wouldn't publicly say, oh, he's innocent. I'd say that let's have due process. I won't stand in the way. If there's an arrest warrant, arrest him. But I think that there are valid questions over how this is handled sometimes. How, if you're accused of something, I'm thinking here about me too. It's just like, well, believe all women. So if that's your position, then you're basically saying, therefore, all men must be lying. All men must be. Of course, the other side is true as well. Uh, you have to take claims seriously, and you can't. I think too many people do assume that women are just seeking attention or lying, when sometimes there is definitely something to it. Um, but yeah, sometimes it is very easy to think that we live in a cynical era. When we look at the past, it's easy to think like other eras. were more simple, more straightforward. But the truth is, every time period has had challenges. So, okay, in the 50s, let's say, there was no social media. People were maybe more trustful of their neighbors. Maybe there were more family values. By the same token, though, there was probably also more people trapped in loveless marriages because divorce was more taboo. Maybe there was also, well, obviously, there's racial segregation in the States. So every era has its problems. There's no such thing really as a golden era, in the sense that every era has some issues. Um, but I don't think we can really deny that we do live in a cynical time, and that's sad. But the caveat to that is, and I want to finish on this positive note, I do believe that there are a lot of good people out there. I believe that most people are probably fundamentally decent. I'm optimistic enough to believe that. I think that where you get social movements, and this is why I'm pretty critical of them, whether they be, right-wing conspiracy groups, whether they be left-leaning groups like Black Lives Matter, Extinction Rebellion, Me Too, um, social movements by nature polarize people. So I think everyone should be very careful what they associate themselves with. If it's a point of conviction, that's, fine. But I think if you associate with a movement, then its actions can reflect on your association with it. Um, but I really think that when push comes to shove, I know for a fact there will be individual Black Lives Matter activists, Extinction Rebellion activists, Me Too activists who I probably would get on fine with, even though I disagree with some of the narrative coming out from the movement that they're part of. Um, you know, Not some of the narrative, a lot of the narrative, if I'm being honest. Um, on my contact list, I have people from all backgrounds. I have people who are Trump voters. I have people who are Extinction Rebellion activists. Now, I'm not doing that just to be diverse. And I have occasionally cut people off whereby they've lied about me or they've, unacceptably smeared me in that way. I won't tolerate that. But I think that it's obviously I'm connected with those people because there's something about them that I like or I'm okay with or we have a mutual interest in. You know, I mean, the Extinction Rebellion people I could think of, I know that they are, as individuals, they're generous, they're kind. I know the Trump guy that I know. He, you know, he's a very friendly guy. He's very jovial. He's friendly on a face-to-face basis. I strongly disagree with his conspiracy theories and his support for Trump. That's People are complex. People are complex, and I think that we would do well to look at the positive in society now and again. We would do well not to always try to find ulterior motives. This is why I am so critical of. I mean, there's a contradiction here. I'm talking about cynicism. I'm cynical. I'm cynical about, for example, critical race theory. I'm cynical about the way the media approaches certain things because I think they create cynicism. I even extend this to politics and politicians. I've long believed that there's a large segment of the British press are negative just for the sake of being negative. And that's why politicians get so vilified in this country. And I know I'm probably in a minority with that. There will be a lot of people who say they bring it on themselves. Well, my response to that is yes and no. Yes, insofar as they make decisions that impact people's lives, and controversial decisions will obviously be controversial. But an interesting phenomenon is when people are asked about politicians in general, they're pretty cynical. They say, "Oh, they're all in it for themselves. It's a very dishonest business. It's very cynical." But when you look at people's own personal or local MPs, I should say, it's generally a bit more supportive. You go to any MP's Facebook page, you find most of the comments are actually quite positive because that's coming from their own constituents, and ostensibly they're the people who voted them in. So, in that sense, on a localized basis, it tends to be less cynical. People even talk about their MP on a first name basis. Like, so that's something to me which gives a little bit more hope that maybe people tend to look at the group, they tend to look at the profession, they tend to look at the movement, they tend to look at the ideology. We have to look at people as individuals. Now, some people are obnoxious, they are just very polarizing individuals, but it's a healthy thing to try to look for the good in people. It's a healthy thing and a good thing to try and think, well, actually, there is a lot of kindness out there. I read about a young boy in Manchester, 11 years old. He found £400. I think it had come out of an ATM or something, and he handed it over. So that shows that young guy had a lot of integrity, more than some adults have. Now, that kind of counters this narrative that all young people are, sometimes we hear these generalizations about young people. Well, I really think if you look, you don't even have to look hard. There is plenty of decency and kindness in society, left, right, and center. I know people I really like who are on the political left. I know people I really like who are on the political right. Um, People are complex, and it's something I've learned over the years that you can't just oversimplify individuals. So that's a reason not to be cynical because everyone has their own little universe going on. And, it's not realistic that we just get on with everyone. There's going to be people that we don't like and we don't get on with. But as a general principle, I think we do have to look at positives because there are a lot more than people think.